One of our most popular blogs on our website is a blog called As Is versus To Be. And the blog came about after a LinkedIn conversation, which I think to date is still the most commented on post I've ever made on LinkedIn. And it was asking the question, should I bother doing as is, map as is processes? And of course, there were lots and lots of people who were sort of arguing, going, well, actually, it's just a waste of time doing as is processes. But my personal view is a bit like Lawrence and Sam said there. It's, if you're an analyst coming in, you need to understand what's happening today. You need to understand where the pain points are so that you can help people address them and do something differently. With, I guess you mentioned, Lawrence, the exception where there is no process today, or there's not enough of a standardization for people to even come together and start talking about what that might be, in which case you might want to jump straight to the to be. I've often used the term to be plus, sorry, as is plus, or as is plus plus. And by that I mean that sometimes you're in a situation where you're trying to capture a process for the first time, and actually you find in the workshop that everybody has a slightly different way of doing it. And so you say, okay, well, rather than us document all the different variations, we'll make a note that there are variations, but we'll also agree today from this point on that we'll all have a discussion, we'll agree the best way to do it, and then we'll capture that, we'll document that rather than everything. And as I say, I call that as is plus, because it's often pretty much as is, but it's just you're just ironing out some of the small variances between the different processes. So just to be very clear, what we mean by as is and to be. So as is all about mapping the process as we understand it happens today, and to be is about mapping or designing the process for how we want it to run tomorrow or at some point in the future. So what I want to do, before I go on, just based on that basic description, does anyone disagree with that, or would add anything to? No.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this session really, because this is a question. So not addressing the question of should you do as is versus to be. We've talked about our opinions on that, but the next question we often get asked is, how do I do that in Skore, or what's the best way to do that in Skore? And so what I'm going to do is just sort of show you two slight variances on how we think about this and the two most common ways of tackling it. And essentially it breaks down into whether you're looking at making incremental changes to the process. So it might be that you've got a to be and then another to be and another to be in the future, or whether you're making a significant change, or it's part of a very specific or focused project. So let me start with the second of those two, and I just share my screen. Really the simplest and easiest way to do this is to create multiple versions of the process within the workspace. So you'll see here I've got two processes. One's called the process is process invoices. So again, I've picked something very, very specific, and in this case this is something that you'll probably recognize, Lawrence. The thinking here was about how can we use automation to improve this process. Okay, that's the question being asked. So you can see how it's very specific. We're looking at how can we take a process and make it better by using automation. So you would start off by capturing the process invoices. Now, once you've mapped that, once you've captured your as is, what if you think about this beforehand, what I'd highly recommend, and especially now in Spinnaker, because this makes it so much easier, is really being very descriptive with the title of the process. So the process is process invoices, but putting as is into the box, into the name of that process, really helps it stand out. Now, once you've mapped that process, you can come here and use this feature, the duplicate feature here. So when you click that, that will create a complete perfect duplicate of that process. And then you can go and use the properties field, and you could go in, this would be called process invoices as is dash copy. So you would then edit the name of that and change it to process invoices 2B to give you the two different processes. So I'd say very explicit in the titles there. So let me just then sort of talk a little bit about what you might be doing in there, again in this particular context. So what I've done here is captured the process, the standard processing invoice process here. So we've got invoices coming in from suppliers. They're going to be imported. They're going to get paired against a PO, and then there's a different routes that this may take. So invoices match POs under 10,000 or over 10,000, and you can see there's two different routes for approval that it will go to. So under 10,000 it goes to the finance admin, and then over 10,000 the finance admin then sends it on to the finance manager for approval. We've got a few processes down in a few activities down in the detailed view here, but one of the things that you will see here is we've got some of the boxes are highlighted. So in this case, these ones are highlighted green. And the reason these ones are highlighted green is because we've identified these as opportunities for automation, and we want to highlight them. So again, we're using this process, this as is process, to be able to tell a bit of a story, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to capture the process, and then we're going to do some sort of assessment or analysis on it to say, well, what can we change or improve? And then I'm using the style rules feature to highlight that. So the way that works is if I click on the attachment here, we've basically used a custom field, called it automation. I've created a grouping. I think the difference is between simple, medium, and hard. So there it's like, how easy would this be to automate? Well, that particular step's going to be very simple, but it might be a bit more difficult and so on. So I can group it by that. And then what I've done is created a style rule in there, which basically says, if you see automation on the box and the grouping is simple, change the box to green. Equally, when I was down here, we had one that was orange, and if I click on the attachment there, you'll see again we've got the automation field on it. The grouping is medium, so in this case it's making it orange. And so again, as I said before, it's about telling a story. So we're starting to be able to say to if we're presenting this back to anyone, look, here's the existing system, and these are the steps we believe that we could remove or automate and make much easier. So very, very visual, as I said, and in terms of telling a story. Now, the nice thing is that you can then, if you open the 2B version in another tab, I think this might, yeah, this does. So again, you can then jump in here and sort of start to show people how the process has changed. So the main thing here is we're saying, well, actually, that submit invoices for approval, those ones under 10,000, well, if we've paired it to a PO, we can make a reasonable assumption that actually this can be automatically sent through to the finance admin for a finance manager for approval. Whereas, sorry, I got that the wrong way around. So for the POs over 10,000, we can automatically send them through to the finance manager. For the ones that are under 10,000, what we can actually do there is we can say, well, because we've paired the invoices to a PO, the chance of there being anything wrong with this is very, very slim. So what we'll do is we'll actually automatically approve those low value invoices, except in the cases where the automation can't pick something up that it doesn't understand, in which case it might push it out to the finance admin to do manually. But again, you've got this nice ability to say, hey, look, well, here's the original process, and these are the bits we said we were going to automate, and this is what the new process is going to look like. And we can see where we've got now a system picking up those activities and doing them instead of the users. And equally, when you're doing this sort of as is 2B side by side, You can also do this, of course, with the quantify. So I've used the quantify attachment on the boxes, and then we can go in here, look at quantify, and we can then see, okay, this is what the as is looks like. I think this might actually not be too different because I'm not sure how much of it I changed, but if I were to go through, I can then sort of compare side by side. Okay, you can see a big difference here. We've got 2 days versus 1 day for the lead time, because we've removed some of the delay, because we've automated some of the approval steps. We've taken a huge chunk of delay out of the process. But again, you can see where that's quite nice to be able to compare those visually side by side, and it really helps tell the story. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions on that? Just a little thing here, which is quite nice. I think when it refreshes, but when you do the quantify selection, so the little simulation tool here, it remembers what you put in there. So when you switch between the two, it will update on the other one as well. So that's quite useful. So you're comparing the same volumes each time. Okay, so that's the most obvious and simple way of managing the as is and to be processes. So as I said, you map your as is, you make a copy of that process within the workspace, and then you can make your adjustments and then compare the two. Now, one of the things that sometimes happens in this type of project, so I've got a very, very simple process here, but you might have something that's a lot bigger or considerably more complicated, and what happens is your to be design is the thing that you want at some point in the future, i.e. not tomorrow, but at some point. And actually, to achieve the to be, the change that you need to make to get there might require several steps to be able to do that. It's not a change that you're going to make in one go. And so if you're in that sort of position, then what you can actually start to do is you can, within a single process, you can use the revisions and versions to start to manage that approach. So in that initial design stage, I would still recommend thinking about this from having two processes, where we are today and where we want to get to, because in your design you can do anything you want. You can do something really radical, you can pull it apart, you can argue with people about how it might work, you can do your what if analysis to understand the impacts and so on. But as I said, at some point you want to kind of feed that back into the main process. And so we would use versions and revisions to do that. And so what I'm going to do is jump into a slightly different process and just talk through that example. So here I've got a production process example. Here you can see that this is a published process. So if I click on this process, when I click on it, it's going to take me to the latest published version of that process. Okay. Now I know that as a editor here, I can see I've got this bar across the top that says open the latest revision for edit. So if I want to go and see what the latest kind of edits are, I can click there, which I'll go to in a second. So essentially, because this is the published version of the process, then this is my to be process for this particular in this particular example, this production process. This is what it looks like today. My to be then, if I click on this and jump to this revision here, is where we are introducing a new section to the process. So we've got a manage production quality section to the process that wasn't previously there. So I haven't yet published this, and it might be that I want to use this to sort of socialize it with certain groups before. Maybe we're still reviewing it, we're running it through teams to get them to sort of check that they're happy with it. Maybe the training department are preparing some training material around this that will where people need to be trained before it gets published out. So that there I've got both my as is and my to be within the one process card, but they're separated by versions, if you like, or revisions. So I can access that I mean, if I wanted to make this now, if I wanted to make this the as is, I could go through the publish process and that would publish it and then make it the latest version. But before I do that, let me just go in. So on the left hand side here, I'm clicking on the map properties section. And then within here, there's a menu and there's an option called process history. And if I click on that, that will open up. So what this is showing, what this enables me to see is all of the different revisions and versions. Okay, so let's just remind ourselves what the difference between those two things are. Revisions get saved into the database when we're editing processes. So when we're changing boxes and so on, it's creating what we call snapshots or revisions within the database. So we can go back and look at what they are. Versions are when I publish a revision. So I'm taking my revision and say, I want to publish this as an official version. I can have somebody approve that before it gets published. Now, when you open this up, it will by default show you only published versions, but if I just go to all revisions, you'll see. So as I scroll down, you'll see lots of different, and you can see there were different people involved in creating or editing it. So each of this is the sort of timeline that goes down the left, and then each of these with the little circle with the floppy disk. I'm not sure if Sam and Lawrence, or you know what a floppy disk is?
Just about, yeah. Very old-fashioned.
So these are basically the revisions that get created when you're editing the process. You can see here I was doing an edit on the 8th of September at 7:25, and then another one at 10 past 9. Now, any one of these, you can see I can do a publish or a request approval. But as I go up here, some of these have got ticks next to them, and so at some point we took this revision 23 as it was, and I published it, and that became version 1. So that was, if anyone clicked on the process, they would go to version 1. Now you can see now it says that it was published, so there's been subsequent publication afterwards. So again, you can see there were some more revisions before another one was published. I think that was earlier today, wasn't it? Yeah. And then again, another one was published here. So the current official version is on 3. And that's the version that you see that doesn't have that extra box on it, if you like. That's our as is at the moment. The one that has the extra box is the editable revision. That one there, that's where we've been editing. Now, what I should be able to do here is create a snapshot now. Okay, it's refreshing for me. Okay, so I've created a snapshot. You don't normally have to do that manually. I'm just doing it manually to demonstrate the feature here. But it will automatically create those snapshots while you're editing the process. But I just wanted to show you here. So I've now got that revision which has that extra box added, if you like. So remember, what I'm trying to show here is that we've got some sort of major design change that we might want to reach in 2 to 3 months time, but we're going to do it incrementally. So we know, or we roughly know, what those steps might be. So now I've created that snapshot, I can come in here and put a new note and say, okay, this is stage 1 of the new process design rollout. Okay, so I save that note against it. And so I'll now know that revision 28 is the one that we want. We're not ready to publish it yet, as I said, because the training team or whatever are working on that, creating training materials. But at some point we will want to do that. But now I'm able to go and work on the next edition that we're going to make, and so on. So I can go on editing that now, and I can start building the stage 2 version of that process. And so I can add the extra boxes in. And so from in here, I can start to manage what those stages of rollout might be. But actually, I only then need to come back and publish each stage to push them out to the users as they come. So I hope that made sense, what I was explaining there, that the idea is you don't always have to jump straight away to a major change. You can actually use this revision and version history to be able to make incremental changes towards your future state process.